Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. The midterm campaign is in the final push, the outcome of which, say political analysts, will be nothing short of historic. Among the first to predict big gains for Republicans was our very own Newsmax contributor Dick Morris, who joins us now at Newsmax headquarters and ever so confident Republicans will win both chambers.
Yeah, well, it's getting more and more likely each day. I don't know a single Republican candidate whose poll I've looked at in the last day or two who is not 3 or 4 points better than they were 2 or 3 days ago. Trend happens at the very end, and you're really seeing a Republican trend kick in, not the same one as last month or that's been going on all this time, a brand new one for the downscale voters who are just beginning to decide, and it's pretty remarkable.
Now, Republicans need to win 10 seats to take control of the Senate, and a number of pollsters have said they are not confident that this will happen. But some Republican leaders are, and so are you. Why is it that you're right and they're wrong?
Well, O'Reilly said I was the only one on the planet that was predicting a Republican win in the Senate, but I am. I think that right now we have leads in 9 of the 10 seats that we need. And in the 10th, West Virginia, I think that the Republicans coming on strong. I think that the current polls are all 3 points to pro-Democrat because they're using turnout models that I think are based really on the '08 election, and that's an unduly Democratic sample. So I believe we're going to win the Senate.
Dick, I want to get your thoughts on some key races in just a moment and talk also about the House. But first, I want to ask you about a new poll from Gallup, which finds that 55% of likely voters are Republicans and independents who lean Republican. This is higher than the Republican showing in the past 4 midterms. 40% of likely voters now consider themselves Democratic, which is the lowest such percentage of the past several midterms. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that it's reflective of what's going on out there. I think that a lot of people are looking at the environment and concluding that they're more Republican than Democrat. And I think it's one of the baselines that I'm looking at in making my predictions.
Now, according to published reports, Republicans are so confident of their chances of winning control of the House and possibly the Senate that they've already begun to plan a 2011 agenda, which includes $100 billion in spending cuts, tax reductions, and attempts to undo parts of Obamacare and financial regulation laws. How much of this agenda can they advance, and how quickly?
Well, I think that may be a limited agenda. I think that the American public is going to want a whole lot more than $100 billion in spending cuts. We have a deficit of $1.3 trillion, so $100 billion wouldn't help us that much. I think that the leadership of the House, the Republican leadership, is basically centrist and basically more moderate. And I think that the new members who are going to come in, the Tea Party types, believe in 0 tax increases and big spending cuts. And I would look for that agenda to move decisively to the right when they actually begin to meet their constituency. Remember that about 40% of the Republican caucus in the House are going to be freshmen. And that's going to have a big change on the process and keeping them honest.
Dick, you advised President Clinton, former President Clinton. In 1994, when Democrats lost control of Congress, President Clinton triangulated and moved toward the center. Do you see President Obama capable of doing the same?
I think he personally might be, but I don't think the environment is such. When Clinton was moved to the center, there were a variety of issues that had a center. Welfare reform. You could say, well, we're going to preserve Medicaid and we're going to preserve food stamps, but to get welfare, you have to work, and there's a time limit, but we'll give you daycare and we'll give you transportation assistance and job training and all that stuff. That was the centrist position. Or on crime, you could say, well, we'll hire extra cops, we'll have the death penalty, but we'll also have gun control, and that was a centrist position. On the issues that we're dealing with now, they're largely quantitative. How much are you going to raise taxes? How much are you going to cut spending to deal with the deficit? And there you're either 0 or non-zero. There's a position that you could call really absolute 0, no tax increases. And if you go stray from absolute 0, it's like being a little bit pregnant. And I don't think that there really is that capability here. I think that if Obama gets to be a little bit pregnant, it's not going to be to the center. It's a left-wing position.
All right, well, let's get to some of these key races that are very, very close. Real Clear Politics says that 6 Senate races are toss-ups. They are Colorado, Illinois, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Washington, and West Virginia. Do you see it that way? And what insights do you have into these races?
Well, let's just go through them.
All right, Colorado.
Well, Colorado, Buck, the Republican, had been way ahead of Bennett, the appointed senator. Then he began to fall back into a tie. Now he's showing a small lead again. And given the trend that I think is going on, I think he's going to win.
What about Illinois?
Illinois, I'm much more confident of. Their internal polls show Kirk 6 or 7 ahead. The published polls have him 4 ahead. I think that's breaking nicely.
Nevada, Sharon Angle versus Harry Reid.
Well, for the last 2 to 3 weeks, Sharon has had a 3 or 4 point lead ever since she clobbered Reid in the debate. And I think that's going to hold up. I think she's going to win.
What about in Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania was in trouble about 2 weeks ago, but now Toomey has a very large lead, 8 points.
Washington State?
Well, that's the big one that's changing. 2 days ago, Murray was 3 ahead. The new Rasmussen poll has Rossi 1 ahead, the Republican. And among people who have already voted, early voting there, Rossi is 2 ahead. Among people who have not yet voted, Murray is 1 ahead. So you can see what's happening. The more likely you are to vote, the more likely you are to vote for Rossi. So I think that's going to be our 9th seat.
What about West Virginia? This one is also very close.
Well, West Virginia would have to be the 10th. And that's the one that really is at the moment could go either way. Racy, the Republican, had been ahead. Then Manchin moved ahead. And we haven't had a poll since Tuesday. So we'll see.
Are there any other Senate races that you think are in play?
Yeah, I would not write off Boxer Fiorina. The latest poll has Boxer only 3 ahead. She was 5 ahead a few days ago. And I think that, again, the turnout differences, California could be a really close election that could go on for several days till we know who won. No. I also think that if you're seeing a real Republican trend, you can't write off Connecticut or Delaware. In Connecticut, Blumenthal was 13 ahead. Now he's 8 ahead. And that's in a matter of a few days. You can see that race tightening. And in Delaware, Christine O'Donnell was 23 behind, and then 19 behind, and now 10 behind. And again, when a race starts to tighten like that, you don't know how far it's going to go.
So you think she still has a chance?
Yeah.
All right. Well, earlier this week, you predicted that Democrats could lose as many as 100 seats in the House. Do you still stand by that prediction?
Well, I'm not predicting 100. I'm predicting 60 to 80.
Okay.
But I fantasize 100.
Oh, okay.
And I think that that fantasy may come true. What I'm doing is working with a group called superpacusa.com, and we've identified 24 seats that are not in everybody's list of 50 or 60 that people are working on, under the assumption that we've kind of won those 50 or 60. And now we're going into these 24 other seats and a few others beyond it. And I believe that we're going to succeed in a lot of those races, and I think it may end up being north of 80.
Democrat from Massachusetts, Representative Barney Frank, faces a tough re-election battle from a Republican Iraq war veteran. In the wake of Senator Scott Brown, a Republican, getting elected to the late Senator Ted Kennedy's seat, what would be the significance of Barney Frank losing this race?
Well, I think it would be enormous, and I think there's a good chance that he could be defeated. That's one of the districts I'm working in. Frank is now under 50% of the vote. He's at 49. And, you know, when a guy is as well known as Barney Frank is, when 51% of the people are either voting for his opponent or say they're undecided, that's not good news for Frank. We also have a chance in Massachusetts to defeat Nikki Tsongas, the widow who's now a congressperson, and John Tierney. And we also have a shot in that open seat that Delahunt vacated. So there are really 4 seats in play in Massachusetts, of all places.
What about gubernatorial races? The new crystal ball analysis from Larry Sabato predicts 8 to 9 Republican gains on Tuesday. What do you think, and where will the gains come from?
Well, I think Republicans are going to win Pennsylvania. These are Democrat takeaways. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, those basic ones, and Tennessee. Those will be 7. And then there are others where we might be competitive. I wouldn't write off Massachusetts for Patrick, for Duval Patrick. And I think that there are a number of others. I think we can win in Georgia. I think we can win in New Mexico. I think will likely be a takeaway. And in Colorado, the Republican Mays has fallen way back, but Tom Tancredo is very competitive, and I think he may win that race. People in Colorado need to vote for Tancredo. So I think it may go to 8 or 9 or 10.
Dick, there are reports that Acorn was reborn and with early voting underway is perpetuating voter fraud. We heard of one case in which a Tea Party affiliated group in Harris County, Texas is being investigated by Justice simply for reporting what it thought was voter fraud. If reports like these are true, do you see that impacting the election's outcome?
Well, I think there certainly will be attempts at voter fraud. But the thing about voter fraud is you have to have support to do it. You can't just go in and, I mean, you can fix a voting machine, but you get caught. What you really need is busloads and busloads and busloads of people that are willing to come in and vote who are not registered to vote or vote in multiple places or whatever. And for that, you really need a certain level of grassroots support. You can't just manufacture it. And I'm not sure the Democrats have the support in the minority and in traditional Democratic constituencies to pull off massive voter fraud.
All right. President Obama this week appeared on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Earlier this week, he said that his name is not on the ballot, but his agenda is. Do you see the midterm election simply as a referendum on the president and his policies, or is the Tea Party Republican message of smaller government and more controlled spending resonating with voters?
I think that it is, and I think it also is a referendum on Obama. But I think more than, as much as either of those, it's a referendum on Congress. People saw this year Congress up close and personal. And you remember that wonderful line, Bismarck invented it and then Mark Twain used it, that nobody should ever see a sausage being made or a law being passed because you wouldn't want to eat a sausage and you wouldn't want to have a Congress like that. Well, we actually saw a law being passed really up close, and we saw all the deals and all the shenanigans that went on. So I think Congress has a low rating, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I also believe that the Daily Show interview, the Jon Stewart interview, will prove a real element in Obama's undoing and might be partially responsible for some of the trend that I'm seeing. It was akin to the Roger Mudd interview of Ted Kennedy in 1980, where he performed so badly he doomed his candidacy. Stewart, to his credit, asked Obama some really tough questions, and Obama had no answers. He said, you know, in your campaign you said, you can't expect new policies from the same old people. Why did you appoint Larry Summers to run your economy? And Obama just had no answer. And aren't you too timid in your agenda? It was a left-wing critique of Obama, but it really went to why Democrats are not voting and why they're not enthusiastic about this president. I predict that as a result of these elections, Obama will get a Democratic primary from the left. I wonder if a Dennis Kucinich might not run against him in that race, assuming he hangs on to his House seat. I think that Obama is very vulnerable right now to a challenge from the left.
Do you see a run by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think that if the left-wing challenge gets traction, she might at that point jump in. It's eerily similar to 1968. The part of Lyndon Johnson is played by Barack Obama. The part of Bobby Kennedy is played by Hillary Clinton. And the part of Eugene McCarthy, the stalking horse who softens it up and tests the territory, might be played by a Kucinich or somebody like that.
Dick, we've been following a developing story involving former President Bill Clinton, in which he may have tried to ease Florida Democratic Senate hopeful Kendrick Meek out of the three-way race with Republican Marco Rubio and Independent Governor Charlie Crist. What is the political significance of this, and what impact might it have?
Well, I think that in the short term, it's going to help Rubio win this election. I think Crist showed his true colors when he coordinated with the Obama White House in their efforts to get Clinton, to get Meek to pull out of the race. And I think that that really shows that we have basically two Democratic candidates and only one Republican in Florida. I think the other short-term effect of it is the Democrats did not need this story as the lead article in the New York Times on the Friday before the Tuesday election. I think in longer term, it will hurt Clinton with the minority community because once again, he's trying to oppose a minority candidate. And I think that's going to hurt him. Eventually, though, I want to know what he offered Joe Sestak to pull out of the race in Pennsylvania, what he offered Kendrick Meek to pull out of the race in Florida, and what the Obama administration offered Romanoff to pull out of the race in Colorado. And I hope that a Republican committee in the newly elected Republican House subpoenas those people, including President Clinton, and asks him that question.
All right, we'll be watching. Political analyst Dick Morris, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.